Bros, this episode of South Park was fire, so let's talk about it. Back to Cold War is the 4th episode of the 25th season of South Park, and even though they were referencing the war that's going on right now, they did it in such a hilarious way that I couldn't even be mad. This episode focuses on Mr. Mackey's preparation for nuclear war and Butter's preparation to compete in a dressage tournament. Now they're obviously referencing the Russian invasion of Ukraine in this episode. They would also reference the two Cold War 80s films, Red Dawn and Rocky IV. This episode kicks off with Mr. Garrison telling his 4th graders that he and his boyfriend Rick got into a fight. Yeah, that's no surprise. The class were worried about the US getting invaded by Russia, while this man Mr. Garrison was going on about his relationship that nobody gives a crap about. Mr. Mackey enters the class and announces an immediate safety drill, and pretty much throughout this episode, the drills start to become more about Mr. Mackey than the actual safety of the students. This man started playing some random 80s tunes after this drill.
And take your baby by the heel.
Like, come on, dude. What are we doing here, Mr. Mackey? Bruh. And while this was going on, we see that Butters was training to compete in this dressage tournament, and with all the devastating events going on in the real world, it didn't help that Butters' parents were putting a lot of pressure on him to win because he was going up against a Russian kid. Man, Butters' parents are hilarious and just out of pocket at times. Later on in this episode, PC Principal tells Mackey to stop his increasing amount of nuclear bomb safety drills. As it appears, Mackey was becoming overly nostalgic for the era. Mackey responds by sneaking into PC Principal's office and taking photographs of some personal documents. Not gonna lie, this episode was kinda all over the place, but it was pretty interesting. And might I mention that throughout this episode, as Butters is trying to train for his upcoming event, we see that all his horse wants to do is poop everywhere and have intercourse with the other horses. Bruh. If you watch this episode on South Park's website, they actually showed the horses you know what. It's freaking hilarious. And it makes me feel like less of a man. Bruh, these horses be packing down there. Now, as Mr. Mackey was reviewing the pictures that he had taken, Butters was asking Mr. Mackey for counseling about his parents, who are known for being super abusive to little old Butters. But while Butters was telling Mr. Mackey about his situation, this conversation triggers him to know everything about dressage. Mr. Mackey finds out about this Russian family that was living in town through Butters, the family of the Russian kid that he was competing against, and this leads Mr. Mackey to investigating this family. But while he was there, he runs into Butters' parents, who were in the stable trying to sabotage the horse. Steven was accusing Mr. Mackey of being on the Russian side, but Mr. Mackey claims he didn't come there to stop them. He was there because he had somehow linked them to PC Principal, saying he was a Russian spy. And he had somehow linked this to the horse dressage competition because according to him, the communists were going to use it as justification to fire the nuclear missiles. And he had said Butters might be involved. I'm sure you've noticed by now that this is pretty much a Mr. Mackey episode, which I'm not mad about. At least they fixed the man's voice right. Now Mr. Mackey shows up to his mom's crib and we get to see his room as it was back in the 80s. This was pretty damn cool. Looks like my guy Mr. Mackey had some good taste. He was telling his mom that he felt that World War III was about to start and that he was going to do whatever it took to protect his country. He uses an old computer and a dial-up modem to infiltrate the computers at NORAD. Bruh, who remembers dial-up internet? Man, the early days of the internet were crazy. Mackey was using this old technology to hack into the US nuclear defense system and convinces their computer that the Russians were attacking. Mackey was on the verge of setting the nuclear defense system to DEFCON 3, which if you aren't familiar with what a DEFCON is, it's basically a defense readiness system for the military, with 3 being the worst one so far and 5 being the less threatening. But before this happens, it seems Mr. Mackey's mother gets to the root of the problem. The true source of his nostalgia is the fact that Mr. Mackey was getting old, and he seems to become nostalgic for this potential war because it takes him back to the 80s when he was younger and more free and life still felt brand new. He was using this war to cope with the fact that he is indeed getting old, and even though he knew the Cold War was a depressing time for everyone, including himself, it was that nostalgia that was blinding him, because we know nostalgia has a way of making things seem greater than they were. I think we all can relate to Mr. Mackey in that way. With me being 24, getting older, getting wiser, gaining more responsibility, it would probably be easy for nostalgia to blind me into thinking being a kid again would be better, when I can for sure say that even with all the bullshit that comes along with being an adult, it's still way better than being a kid. So if you take anything from this episode, don't let nostalgia blind you. But yeah guys, this episode was pretty much all over the place, but like I said, it was pretty interesting, and I would like to know if you guys got a chance to check it out and if you enjoyed it. So if you did, let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. And until next time, peace.